Totalitarians, communists, what do they want? Power, right? George Washington's a role model for men today. He had all the great virtues: humility, courage, who led us to victory over the Empire of Britain. Here's a man who was not a politician, but a statesman who's concerned for you. He wrote this a long time ago to warn so that you could have freedom. To put all those great virtues to work, you've got to maintain your freedom. What Washington started, we must continue as men. It's up to us to preserve freedom. Restoring Men in History, George Washington's warnings to the people in his farewell address, written mostly by Alexander Hamilton. The first couple of paragraphs were written by James Madison, both founding fathers. Now, why is it important? It's important to protect your freedom. If you don't know the Constitution, if you don't know the founders, it's more difficult to maintain it. And certain individuals are always trying to take your freedom and gain more power. You've seen it. Totalitarians, communists, what do they want? Power, right? If you think it's important to build better, stronger men, please subscribe. We would appreciate it. So in his farewell address, we'll look at two pieces today. We'll do foreign entanglements later because that's very important for today as well. His advice is still good if Congress wanted to follow it, but they don't want to follow it. Why? Probably for big government and power for themselves, right? Or enrichment for themselves or something. I'm sure it's varied, multivariate for the individuals. But overall, as a majority and a body, Congress keeps increasing spending, increasing the debt upon you and your children and grandchildren. Freedom disappears with massive debts, and inflation comes with it. So it's important to know, if you're ambitious, if you're hardworking, and you want to take care of your family or take care of yourself or your girl, how do you do it? To put all those great virtues to work, you've got to maintain your freedom as a man and a citizen of the Republic. Read it after we do it. Ask your congressman questions because you're a citizen of this republic, and to maintain your freedom, who's it up to? Us, right? Me, you. Growth of the federal government. It was ratified to be a limited government. The more debt, the larger the federal government. What happens? The less freedom you will have. America's supposed to be the shining city on a hill, and we want it to be that. And people who want to live in freedom want that. There's a price to debt and spending, and it falls upon you and your family. Proverbs 22:7 says, the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower becomes the lender's slave. And we don't want to be slaves, do we? We should never take freedom for granted. You men may be able to want to dream larger, and you can dream much bigger when there's more freedom. You can start a business. Freedom gives you that ability, along with your resilience, your courage, and your ability to take risk. Those virtues as a man, and those kind of men will want more freedom, right? If you're an ambitious, hardworking guy who has great ideas, you want freedom to pursue those ideas, to pursue those businesses, to use your creativity and imagination, to build great things, to conquer, to make your life better and your family's life better. You can do that with the less regulations you have and the less government interferes in your life, right? George Washington's a role model for men today. He had all the great virtues: humility, courage. And this isn't going to be his biography because we want to get to the reading here, but he had courage. He was the general of the Continental Army who led us to victory over the Empire of Britain, and we broke away from an empire. It was never delivered, it was only written. Washington, of course, is called the father of our country. president of the Constitutional Convention of 1787, general of the army, two-term president, and he walked away from it. And he had a lot of humility when he gave the speech at the beginning. Maybe we'll get that some other time. But in the beginning is such humility, and at the beginning he gives such credit to you, the Americans, and it's up to us to continue it. What Washington started, we must continue as men. It's up to us to preserve freedom. There are always people trying to take it from you, trying to take your God-given rights. And before we start the reading, Washington was a man of vision. What he said in this speech, in the whole speech, in the entire speech, should all be followed by Congress. But of course, if you want more power and you want big government, you're not going to follow it. If you want more power and big government, you're going to spend, and put it on you. Create inflation and put that on you. Make the price of eggs, butters go up and increase. As a man, he was constantly improving himself. He wrote a book called Rules of Civility. He read it constantly because he wanted to be a better man. He wanted to self-educate. That's a great lesson for you men, to be better in yourself, become better, stronger men. He was a man of courage, rode at Princeton, in the Battle of Princeton, at the front and led, crossing of the Delaware led it when they attacked the Hessians. So he was a great man of incredible courage and a warrior. So one part of the speech is this. Here's what he says. Of all the dispositions and habits, and he wrote this to the people, which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. That's pretty clear, isn't it? In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. There you go. You men have duties as citizens to stand for freedom. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. Do we cherish that today? Are we cherishing it? Do we cherish freedom? A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Notice, he's talking about the happiness of the people. He's concerned about future generations in America. Isn't that something special? Here's a man who was not a politician, but a statesman who's concerned for you. He wrote this a long time ago to warn so that you could have the freedom that he had, and so that you would never lose it. So he's saying religion and morality bring happiness to the people. So watch you when government is trying to subvert them. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? So it's pretty important that we have justice, and that you can go to court and believe in justice, that you can believe in the judges and politicians and the elected congressmen. What if they've deserted their oaths? On another note, what if they've deserted their oath of the Constitution? They don't care about it, which, as we know from their actions, many do not. They don't follow it, but they take an oath to it. If they followed it, they would stay within the constitutional spheres of their power, and they don't. So if they won't, who will protect your life, liberty, and property? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion, Washington says. And again, where does this need to be done? He's not necessarily talking about from Washington. He's talking about the people you're putting into Washington. And where could that come from? The home, right? You men teaching it in your home, you men learning it in your home, just reading the Bible on your own. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined educational minds of peculiar structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. It is substantially true that virtue, or morality, is a necessary spring of popular government. Again, where's that come from? You can do it in your homes. You can do it in a men's cigar Bible study, wherever you want to do it. It's just something to reflect upon. A perspective. The rule indeed extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference upon it. Attempts to shake the foundation of the fabric. That's a strong statement, right? The foundation of the fabric. The foundation of the republic. Promote, then, as an object of primary importance, institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge, in proportion as the structure of a government gives force to public opinion. It is essential that public opinion should be enlightened. So that's up to you and me, right? And in your homes, because it has to come from the homes now, because the cultural Marxists have infected the cultural institutions and the major institutions, and the church is feminized, and all these places you would go to learn all of this. Debt. Now, this is a big one for Washington, because he warned against debt. And we have way too much now. Anyone can see that, right? And what has the debt done to you? It's created inflation, right? This government and spending. Now you're paying more for eggs, butter, guns, right? As a very important source of strength and security, Washington says, cherish public credit. Now you know, let's stop right here already. And ask yourself, do current politicians do this? Of course not. Do elected congressmen do this? Of course not. We're spending way beyond, and we'll get into that, where we should have been. And it's because Congress doesn't even stay within their constitutional sphere. And you just saw them spend another large $1.7 trillion in December, pushing us further into debt, increasing your goods even more, making your trips to the grocery store that more expensive. Congress keeps spending, so they haven't adhered or listened to the warnings of Washington. Who gains from all that spending? Think about it and reflect upon it. Not the ambitious, average, hardworking American, right? What's the role of government? What's government there supposed to do for you? What's the limited government that was ratified by the states for the Constitution supposed to be doing for you? And what's it not approved to do? What was it not given powers to do? So before they spend any dime or penny, it should be within the constitutional sphere of their authority. Most of the powers were restrained by where? The states. So, and it should be about what? Protecting your life, liberty, and property, right? Role of government. When Congress spends and creates inflation, it's another tax on you. You pay it. When Congress comes up with some new program or agency, or they expand that agency, you pay, because the government has to fund it. And a lot of it is unconstitutional, right? Healthcare was never the purview of the federal government. Constitutionally, we're talking about the Constitution there. Well, let's go on. Washington again. One method of preserving it is to use it as sparingly as possible, and it's almost laughable to say it because they're spending in such enormous ways that this is ridiculous now. Again, you pay. So we know Congress doesn't do that. And then we know they've gone way beyond their constitutional authority, creating all these agencies in different parts to the federal government. Let's go on. Avoiding occasions of expense by cultivating peace. How do you do that? Stay out of wars. Stay out of involvement. Don't send pennies, cents, dollars, quarters, billions to foreign countries to fund a war that we shouldn't be involved in, because it hurts you again. Does it protect your life, liberty, and property to be sending money to a foreign country for their war that we should not be involved in for your benefit? Who does all that spending, by the way, who does all that spending benefit? If you send a lot of money to a foreign country, the military industrial complex, right? People who make weapons, those people, right? Not you. But remembering also that timely disbursements to prepare for danger frequently prevent much greater disbursements to repel it, avoiding likewise the accumulation of debt. Now look how far Congress has gone. He says Washington to avoid the accumulation of debt, and look how far we've gone. Imagine if Congress had wanted to follow his advice. Where would we be today? Where would your life today be? Where would the Republic be? How would we handle an emergency, a true emergency? Much better, right? How many small businesses and jobs would have been created if the government had stayed within their bounds? Not only by shunning occasions of expense, but by vigorous exertions in time of peace to discharge the debts which unavoidable wars may have occasioned, not ungenerously throwing upon posterity the burden which we ourselves ought to bear. Notice the words, vigorous exertions in time of peace to discharge the debts, not get involved in so many areas, in so many places, creating a mess. Discharge the debts, he's saying. Very wise man. So he's saying get rid of the debt, eliminate it. Look how far Congress is off the mark. Fed, look what the Fed does. The execution of these maxims belongs to your representatives, but it is necessary that public opinion should cooperate. To facilitate to them the performance of their duty, it is essential that you should practically bear in mind towards the payment of debts. There must be revenue, that to have revenue, there must be taxes, that no taxes can be devised, which are not or more or less inconvenient and unpleasant, that the intrinsic embarrassment inseparable from the selection of the proper objects, which is always a choice of difficulties, ought to be a decisive motive for the candid construction of the conduct of the government in making it. So, don't spend a lot of money without thinking about it. Don't just spend it because you're going to have to pay for it. And you're going to have taxes to pay for it. Well, they're way beyond taxes, right? We spend way more than we take in. So that's gone too. So we should really never have a tax increase ever, right? Ever. Because they never stay within their bounds. We should not be rewarding people who never stay within their budget. Observe good faith and justice toward all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Religion and morality enjoin this conduct, and can it be that good policy does not equally enjoin it? It will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and at no distant period a great nation to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by what? An exalted justice and benevolence. Who can doubt that in the course of time and things the fruits of such a plan would richly repay any temporary advantages which might be lost by a steady adherence to it? So don't be short-sighted. Can it be that Providence has not connected the permanent felicity of a nation with its what? Virtue, he says. The experiment, at least, is recommended by every sentiment which ennobles human nature. Alas, it is rendered impossible by its vices. So there's some good thoughts to think about. Let's go to the Heritage article. If you like these videos, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification button, and we'll keep making them.